Welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I am author Jaime Vendera and my partner.
They're Karisa delay.
And I'm actually excited today because we have a buddy of mine on, a well-known journalist, Charles Romans. And we haven't had a journalist on the podcast yet, so this is going to be an exciting episode.
Mm-hmm. We hope.
Yep, we hope. Well, I'm here, so we're going to make it
Charles, you
fun.
gotta bring your game.
Yeah, tell us. Let us know about yourself, Charles.
Well, I'll do my best. Ironically, I never wanted initially to be a journalist. I wanted to be the great American author. I grew up reading rather, and writing fantasy and horror and all those other things. And that's what I wanted to do. But I sort of got pulled into journalism. Like most of the good things in my life, it was my wife's idea originally. And once I started it, I fell in love with it because, what's not to love? You get to talk to different people every single day. You get to share their stories and hopefully make the world at least a little bit better. So it's been fun.
No, that's it. That's an interesting statement with the whole journalism making the world a better place. I feel like poor journalism's on the eggshells and fire right now.
Well, it is, yes. Because when people say, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "Well, I write for the newspaper. I'm a journalist." And they kind of get the side eye like this, I'm like, "Well, no." And I've talked about everything from quilt making to national and international.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that happens, you pull out the recorder and people freeze. And I'm like, let's just talk about this. I'm not here to sensationalize it. I just need the story.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, before we hop into questions, and my memory is bad, did you
That's
ever
why
interview me?
We have talked numerous times about this. We have interviewed around you. But
okay, because I remember some, and I thought you'd done a piece, but I didn't know if you'd done the one when Sean Daniel Media had filmed me shattering glass. That was 2012, and then some stuff like in 05, 06 I did for the Ashland newspaper, and I could not remember.
well, this is typical with friends. You say, "Hey, we need to do this," and your friend says, "Of course we do," and then it never happens. You talk about it 20 times.
Yeah, well, so this is why we do this, because I'm on Jaime all the time.
Yep, I guess I'll be meeting up with you soon then.
You got to be on him. You got to be on him and be like, listen, this is what's happening. This is the date. Put it in your calendar and let's just do this.
Yeah, so I know you say your wife inspired it, but I mean, I need to know a little bit more about that. Was she a writer, or did she say, "Hey, pick it up and start doing some writing"?
Yeah, we're assuming you wrote before you started being a journalist,
Oh,
right?
yes, definitely it did. Yes. The thing of it is, the whole story here. I'll break it down for you. My daughter was in Girl Scouts at the time, and she was doing her Gold Award. And my wife said, "You need to do something at this Gold Award for the newspaper." I'm like, "Well, I don't work for the newspaper." She said, "Doesn't matter. Write the story. They'll take it."
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I love my kid and I love my wife, and I wanted them to not stay on me about it. So I did the story, and I did a bunch of background about the Gold Award and everything else, and not just about my kid. So I submit this to the newspaper, and they snapped it up like that. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. You're paying me to write about my kids. So then I had another idea that wasn't my kid. And they snapped that one up too. And before I knew it, I am doing this every day of the week. And like I said before, it's really cool. Now, I do have an English and literature background, but
There you go.
and I know words, I guess you can say. To talk about Steve Martin, we mentioned books earlier. Coming out with my second book soon, where I'm actually going to use vowels, so it would make it easier to read. But that's kind of a key point. It kind of segues into something here. Uh, if I were to just write what Charlie liked, I do have eclectic tastes, but it'd be like my columns I wrote for the paper. In my columns, I talk about everything from global warming, Spider-Man, and anytime you can put the Smurfs and Wolverine in the same story and they pay you for it, that is really cool.
Did you say Smurfs?
And
Yes.
Wolverine.
And Wolverine.
Absolutely. Well, but that's it. I mean, it's good. If you're considering a journalism background, for instance, you want to do that as a career. First thing I would say would be go diverse, because print media fluctuates, and you need to be really comfortable with doing even social media posts, but you need to be uh, a multimedia person. You need to be able to do video, you need to be able to do the writing and everything else, because the world's changing.
Yeah. So it's almost like the pen has now become the microphone.
Yes, it has, but you see, you got to remember, it's all story. So
Hmm.
if you get a good story, however you deliver it, someone's going to read it.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. I know I mean, we've talked about that with print books versus ebooks, the dynamic, the shift. But people are starting to pick up books, but I think it's more of an aesthetic thing because a lot of people will grab a book because the cover is amazing, put it on their shelf, never open the pages, go listen to it on Audible or go read the ebook. They just want the physical copy for their, you know, their trophies.
My
Well,
wife does that. Yep.
I mentioned my daughter earlier. I've literally seen her watch TV, have her Chromebook on, be talking on her cell phone, and doing a couple of other things, but she never opens up a paper newspaper.
Mm.
Oh yeah, so I have typically three things going all at once. I'll have my laptop running with editing the podcast. I will have my Xbox on playing a video game, and then I'll have my phone connected to my computer monitor and having a show running. So I totally feel your daughter. It's just one of those functioning ADHD things.
Yeah. See, same thing here, except then I can't function on any of them. I'm just going boing, 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 boing. So,
Okay, I was born in 1964, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I am the last year, technically, that's part of the baby boomer generation. I like the paper. And I remember growing up, my father had a garage. He fixed cars. And I'd work there late at night. And then I'd come home and, of course, you clean up because you're dirty. And then you're keyed up because you've been working. Well, there's nothing like curling up in bed and just opening up a book and reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but now it's not just generational, because a friend of mine that I used to work with, Mike James, he keeps trying to get me to read all my books on a Kindle. I said, but you can't fold the pages. There's no bookmarks.
yeah.
They've got an app. Part of the app is you can dog ear the pages. I said, yeah, Mike, it's still not the same.
Yeah. And I get it. I prefer print books, but it's just this day and age. And even with the Kindle White, where it looks like paper, it's so quick to flip. You can change font size, fonts. You can reverse the color. So a
Yeah,
lot of
and
people like to only go.
you can pack way more books in your suitcase when you're traveling. Do it on
Yeah.
the table.
So, but I dig it. I mean, I grew up reading the paper. My grandmother was nuts about the National Enquirer, so I got to read about Bat Boy every week.
Oh, yeah.
So that, or
Oh,
And
getting like the
Florida
yellow
man.
pages, just something about that book in your hand is just, or that magazine or that newspaper in your hand is definitely special.
we see. Now, that being said, uh,
Say it again. I'm sorry, we lost you. Say what
I,
did you just say?
I said, if that being said, uh, if you would like to read one of my stories electronically, I'll make that happen. I'll send up smoke signals. I might even sit on your front porch and read it to you, because the important thing is delivering the story. No one gets value if the story is not delivered. How you receive it is almost irrelevant. I prefer
Mhm.
books, but a lot of people don't. It's the story
Yeah.
that's important. That's just like with journalism. I show up, I do an interview. All the fluff doesn't matter. What's the story? Who's going to read it?
So, speaking of that, is there a particular news story you can share or an event that you've covered that has had some impact on you as a journalist?
Oh, definitely, yes. You know, there seemed to have been a spate of children who were suffering from cancer in a local area, and I interviewed a lot of children that dealing with this and their families. And it's one of those stories, you need to get it out there because you need to get these people help. But it really, it's like putting your soul to a sausage grinder to write one of them. because if you have any empathy at all, you're talking to someone who is probably dying and has no light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
then that really hurts you. But I've had people on these stories come back to me and say that they really appreciated me writing these stories. On that note, though, a positive note to that, I have a picture. I saved the picture. One little boy I'd done a story about. He recovered from cancer, and the picture is him with his hands cupped like this, and he's got the last two pills of his chemo.
Mm.
And now, that's been years ago, and now he's a teenager, and he's probably forgotten me talking to him. And honestly, I probably didn't have as much impact on his life as he had on mine.
Right.
But there's a positive note to end that on, because if they get support, get treatment, then they some of them overcome.
That's a good question to kind of go off of that one. Do you find that when you're writing stories and interviewing people and you had a preconceived idea going into it, that coming out of it, you're like, you know what? I think my thoughts have changed now that I've spoke to the people involved. Have you ever had that experience in writing with journalism?
It does happen regularly, because the news is at least supposed to be objective.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult for any human being to be truly objective, because everything we process is filtered through what we already know, and like you said, preconceived notions. So politics for me, is difficult, because I go in thinking, I I really shouldn't say this. I'm not a fan of politicians, though, because it's all doublespeak. To me, politics is like a shell game, and you never know where the pea's at. But I have been pleasantly surprised that I have interviewed some politicians that I thought were sincere and honest, and actually had the well-being and the benefit of their constituents in the forefront of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
They must have been new politicians.
Well,
They
uh,
weren't career politicians, no.
politicians are like women in a relationship. Now, this is nothing against
Careful.
women. Oh, no, you're going to like this.
I
Uh,
don't know.
Talking to a friend of mine, and he was complaining about his girlfriend. I said, look, all women are crazy. And he looked at me. I said, because if they're not crazy when they meet men, men make them crazy. It's actually fault. And I have to say, my wife is my staunchest supporter and my most severe critic.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to listen to both of them, because if she's got a complaint, she's right. I don't like it most of the time, but you, you need someone to be honest with you.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that actually answered the question, but we talked around it.
Yeah.
Politicians do.
So, instead of me criticizing, let me ask the question of criticism in your work when
Yes.
it comes, because you're putting yourself out there in the newspaper for critiquing. How do you handle negative criticism in your writing?
Well, for one thing, my father used to say some people would complain if you hung them with a new rope, meaning you can't make everyone happy. What you've
Mm-hmm.
got to do, whenever you do a story, you got to step back from that subjective thing and be as objective as possible. Give people the clearest uh, version of your information. And at that point, when someone has something negative to say, uh, if it's a specific attack against you, then you got to have a thick skin. But if they're attacking the story, you have to stop and think, okay, are they complaining about this because they think all the information is wrong, or are they complaining because they don't have enough information? So I always try to explain and have a dialogue, because I can debate anything all day long. And a healthy debate is good, because you mentioned earlier, changing perspectives. That if someone complains about a story I wrote and they have a valid complaint about the components of that story, then maybe I should, if not necessarily reevaluate, maybe I should dig deeper. So you've got to take criticism has to be received well, well, because you've got to examine it for what it's worth and try to weed out when someone's just being spiteful.
No, I like that answer because even with, especially with new authors, even with myself in the beginning, I'm just going to say very egotistical, thinking that it was perfect. And we have an editor named Rich Dalglish, and he's torn up several of my stories. And Rich, I love you now, but there was times I hated that dude. I'm like, are you serious? This every word was perfect. No, and now it's like you can't be married to it, and you have to be open. You got to accept the criticism and take it objectively. A lot of people can't. So I love hearing that from a journalist.
Well, see, the
Well,
trick is,
what about with your books now? Like, so you've written. We're going to kind of get into just a little bit. You've written some books, but you haven't put any of them on ebooks. You're saying?
no, well, no, no, not actually. I've thought about doing audiobooks on a couple of them.
Yeah.
But, and again, it's all about trying to deliver the story. You
Mhm.
mentioned that, Jaime, when you thought your stuff was perfect. Well, it's actually two or three different jobs. Editing your own stuff is a lot like being your own lawyer. Good luck.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Another
you should
funny,
never do it.
no, another funny story about my wife. I was writing a fantasy novel. And I love fantasy. Grew up reading it, and I get sometimes I get tunnel vision, and I have my favorite words because words have a certain flavor to them. They're they evoke emotions and things of that nature. And this was actually a minor thing, but I used the word Piscine four times in like three paragraphs, and my wife said, you think maybe you should
Try a
just say
different word.
fish, and nope, that's the way I wrote it. That's the way it's going to stay. And this went on forever. Probably months later, I'm looking back and reading over this, and I'm thinking, I probably should have just said fish. So she was right. And
See,
that's edit.
we've talked about that where you use what we call $5 words. They're too
Yes.
expensive to use often. You got to be very selective and budget your words.
Well, yes, you do, because words are exhausting. And you've got to understand that I love words. Okay. I like the big $5 words, like to read them because, like I said, they're very evocative. But
Yeah, but you don't want to have them so much that you can't process all of them together.
that's true. What happens is that the words get in the way of the story.
Hmm.
When you make a costume and someone puts on this costume and films a movie, for instance, you want to just make it easy for the audience to have that willing suspension of disbelief. They want to see a werewolf, for instance. They don't want to see the zipper in the suit.
Right.
And a lot of times words become the zipper of the suit.
Yeah,
That's good.
I,
that's a good analogy.
I had an editor tell me once, when I first went to work for a company called Ashland Daily Independent, my editor was a great guy named Mark Maynard. So I walk into his office. We were talking about something else. He said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something." I said, "Okay." So I sit down. He said, "I really like your stuff." I said, "Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that." He said, "It's a little long." And I looked at him because I'm thinking, more is better. And and I mentioned another paper. He said, "Well, they were trying to fill the paper." And as this discussion wore on, he said, "Look, the sweet spot for a news article is around 500 words. After 500 words, people's eyes start glazing over." He said, "So if you can put it at 500 words, that's perfect." And of course, my first answer to this was, "So let me get this straight, Mark. You're telling me you're going to pay me the same amount of money for doing less?" He said, "Yeah, I've got no problem with that." I said, "Okay, you're on." So I try to, uh, I ramble because I think information needs to be, people need extra information. But with a good editor, pointing out that you can do too much and it takes away from the story in a very nice way, then I think it improved my writing because you don't have to mention the color of someone's shirt 10 times in 2 pages.
Right. Well, that's probably a key. That's probably a key point between the difference between writing in a journalistic point of view versus the books that you've written. You feel like there's a difference in your language you have to kind of hone in differently than if you're just writing a book.
Well, absolutely, there is. Because I mean, say for instance, you write. I don't know. We'll stick with the car theme here. Say you write a story about. You don't have to explain cars to people because people already know what cars are. So it
Mm-hmm.
gives you a little bit of a shortcut there. So you can do away with some of the flowery stuff. Now you might say, okay, and this '67 Chevelle, 67 Mustang rather, was an amazing vehicle, and I had one of these when I was a kid or whatever, you know. But you don't have to explain what a Mustang is. When you're writing fiction, sometimes, especially things like horror and fantasy and things like that, uh, you have to explain what this thing is. And the trick at that point is to give people the information they need without boring them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a difference between explaining how tall something is uh, as opposed to, oh, this thing is 8 feet tall, and then go into down the rabbit hole in that one aspect. So you got to balance. What I try to do when I'm writing, I try to give people information on, because again, it's back to the zipper thing. Okay, sorry, I knocked my, I'm shaking there. Uh, but again, it's about uh, don't let people see the zipper. You want them to absorb this information as they go and not think that they're reading a textbook.
Right.
I mean, I've read phenomenal books, phenomenal series of books. One of my favorite series of books, I almost didn't get through it because the first half of the book was honestly like someone explaining why paint dries. It was just plotting and everything else. And then halfway through the book, it's like, boom, then it kicks in and the action starts. You know, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, didn't start out with young Indy doing his schoolwork about archaeology. You find out all the background information, actually, over 3 movies.
Yeah. So speaking of like Indiana Jones, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of our fun questions we have for you that you don't even know that are coming.
Okay.
So if you could, swap lives with an author,
Okay.
who would that be and what would you hope to experience?
Ooh, that's tough. First thing I want to say, Ernest Hemingway, because he got out and did stuff, and he was unapologetic about it. And he's like, "Yeah, I drink. Yeah, I shoot stuff with guns. It's what I do. Don't like it, go away." Uh, but it's asked me a question. When I was in college, way back in the dim reach, 93, someone had a Cosmopolitan magazine, and it was like, "Which famous celebrity would you be?" And I'm like, "No one. I'd like to be me and be a celebrity. I might like to enjoy some of the perks, but I would never want to be anyone more than me. Everyone else is already taken."
Mm.
It's funny when I'll have a lot of singing students come to me and they'll be like, "Can you teach me to sound like the singer from Dream Theater or Creed or whatever?" And I'm like, "We've already got that person. Why don't we teach you to sound like you? Because we're
Right.
all individuals." So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Absolutely, and I agree with that completely. I mentioned having eclectic tastes earlier. I have eclectic taste in music. I like everything from bluegrass to hard rock. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
have things that hit the middle ground with stuff, like from the '70s and '80s rock. Uh, but if it's good, I'll listen to it. And it doesn't matter if it was recorded yesterday or 40 years ago. And I think you have to be that way, because if you say, "I only listen to this," or "I only read this," my God, you've lost out on everything.
Yeah, you've closed yourself off to potential, yeah,
Yeah, with
experience.
that said, I would change places with author Karisa delay. That way I could multitask 3 things at once because I just can't do what she does.
Right.
And then go to the beach while afterwards.
I don't even get me started. Don't make me hate you.
Oh,
Well,
you're funny.
as far as multitasking goes, now I can do a lot of different things. I'm not a one trick pony, but I prefer to be a one trick at a time pony. I like
Yeah.
to focus on what I'm doing at that given time.
Well, that's my problem. Like, I'm thinking of 14 different books I want to write, and students I got to teach, and inventions I want to make. And it's just, if I get stuck on one thing, then I get it done. Like, I'm not even going to go into the fact that I'm supposed to written a book for 2 years now that Karisa's on me about, because it's everything else. So, it's just, if I get into writing a book, for me, I'm consumed by it. I have to finish it. And I will like put everybody off and just shut the phone down and everything and go at it.
So
I,
again, I want to move on to this next question just because we have just about 15 minutes left.
all right.
And I know that we have to record another episode, but I want to get as much from you as I possibly can.
Well, I appreciate it.
So if you could time travel to another period in literary history, I'm assuming it's going to be with Hemingway, since you mentioned Hemingway, but maybe it's different as far as a time period goes. When would you go, and what would you want to learn? What time frame?
See, that's a difficult one because, I mean, the first thing you want to say is the future because you want to see what cool stuff people had invented. But
Yeah.
if I were to step back into the past, in spite of the fact that I'm not a huge fan of cold weather, I would like to go back in time and experience all of the interesting things that were going on during the time period where Jack London wrote White Fang, for instance, and Call of the Wild, because there was so much new things happening and people were accomplishing things.
Interesting.
That or I'd go like 300 years in the future and see if anybody remembered who I was.
So if you could have dinner with any fictional character, who would it be and why?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. And now,
These weren't made to be easy. These were meant to get you kind of like on the spot.
yeah, any fictional character.
Well, it even could be a character from your own books.
Oh no, 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 no! I don't think they would like me too well if I sit down and have dinner with them because they go through a lot of horrible. They'd be like, "Dude, why did you know, did you really have to throw me in a dungeon? Was that absolutely necessary?" Yeah, but oh my, uh, there's a really good series of fantasy books written by Raymond Feist called the Rick Saga, and there is a character in these books. He's a supporting character, but he's central to everything that's ever happened, basically. Called Macros the Black, and he's kind of a mover and shaker behind the scenes. And he's not nefarious. He does these things to benefit. But I'd like to be able to sit down with him and have a cup of coffee and say, "So, how did you pull all this off with everybody going in 20 different directions and none of them were right?" That's what I would. That would be.
Okay. Good answer. Good answer.
Thank you.
All right. So now the last question I'm going to ask, and Jamie, don't give any weird eye contact. This is kind of like a subjective question because we both have different answers. And so we want to see what your answer is. But writer's block, is it real or not?
Let me
Oh,
drink my water.
that's real. It doesn't matter why it happens. It does happen. But I've struggled with writer's block before. It's more like I guess like we were talking about early multitasking, writer's confusion because you're trying to write a story and you're thinking you need to cut the grass, take out the garbage. The cats are beating on the screen door because they want fed, and you really need. Uh, so yeah, I mean I've done everything in the world. I remember I grew up. I was writing when I was still at home with mom and dad, and I was working on a story, and I'm pacing through the house because I had writer's block. And my mom comes through the house and she said, "If you're going to walk up and down the hallway, take off those damn cowboy boots." I'm like, oh crap. So I didn't click my writer's block on everyone else too. So it is
Well,
a thing, but it's the noise. It's the background noise of life. I mean,
yeah.
Thank
You're
you,
dead. You're
Charles.
dead to me now, Charlie.
Thank you,
Just so you know,
Charles.
you're dead to me.
well,
I always say,
Oh, wait,
Writer's block doesn't exist. You're either bored or you're excited. That's just my mantra and my mindset.
Which is crazy for Jamie because he literally has so many things going on that keep him from writing. Those are his walls, those are his
Those are
blocks.
writer's hurdles.
well,
Okay, you
these
can
are
jump
all
over
going
hurdles.
inside.
You literally
I got short legs. You know that.
Taurus.
Yeah.
But it's all
Get
about
out of the way,
eliminating.
writer's hurdles.
I can't get to my keyboard.
My wife makes fun of me. I broke both hands over the. You know, I used to type really well. Now I'm a pecker. I type with two fingers. And my wife comes through all the time. She says, "Why are you typing with your middle fingers? Are you or you're somebody?" Well, there's the longest thing.
I grab my phone or my iPad mini and I'm writing books like this. Or I use text to speech, but then it has 400 errors in
Oh
three
God,
paragraphs.
I was using the program, and I don't think I have a real heavy Southern accent, but uh, voice to text programs have a problem with a Southern accent.
They do.
Uh, I
Oh
have.
yeah, Jamie's talk to text comes through like garbage.
She can decipher it now,
I've
mostly.
learned to sort the trash.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to see if AI will actually fix that because, or it's going to fix this, or it's going to say, no, you're just a crazy hillbilly. We don't want no parts of this. So,
Yeah, AI has to be like, go back to the default version of when we didn't know quite as much about humans.
like, do you speak your native language, actually? Uh, so yeah, it all comes down to the keyboard, really, because I used to write everything with an ink pen. It helped me.
Did too
And,
before typing.
I figured since you were so old, it was like back in the you were carving it into stone.
well, it was a quill
Yeah.
pen,
I'm just kidding.
from
You said you were back in the
Yeah, you
dinosaurs,
said
so
Stone Age.
yeah. So, yeah, I had to chase down one of those hawk beak birds that you see all the time. And now there's just no time left for that. So I have to type it because there are deadlines and there's other things to. The cats need fed, the cat and everything else. All the things get in the
sounds
way.
like you and Jamie need. It sounds like you and Jamie need a support group for your grass.
Yeah, we got, dude. I'm not even going to mention on this podcast how many cats we have running around this
Oh,
house.
Lord. I think I saw a lion going through my backyard in the weeds the other day. It's like the Serengeti out there. So,
Yeah,
that's because it never gets done. You cut it and then, look around, it needs cut again. And I'm like, that.
dude, I know. I just cut it and wore me up Saturday. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this.
All right, real quickly, Charles, you have some books. Because we just have a few more minutes and I want to make sure people can find your writing outside of journalism
All right.
because, that's the whole point of this podcast is kind of to bring the world to Charles Roman today.
Oh, well, thank you.
And so tell us where people can find your actual books. Are they on Amazon?
They are on Amazon.
Okay. And they just look up Charles Romans?
Just look for Charles Romans and wade through and find me. And
Okay.
currently
What
I'm
are the titles?
uh, well, there's the book Shadows. It's a book of short stories, all fiction
Okay.
in various genres.
Okay.
Then there's of course I when I worked for Daily Independent, they knew I had a car background, so I did an entire series called Independent on the Road that dealt with classic cars and things of that nature, and a lot of good, interesting stories. People love cars. So there's Around Home, the Automobile Edition is what that is. And then I have a novella that I'm working on having a series of novellas. The first one's called The Broken Seal. It's available, ironically, it's available ebook only right now. And yeah, just search my name and you can find all my stuff.
Okay.
Currently,
And do you have any projects you're working on right now?
yes, I'm working on re-releasing the first book I ever published. It's called Shrink Your Own Head. It's a book of practical philosophy, I should say, humor and a little bit of help. Uh, and then I'm also working on a book right now about the paranormal. It's based on the podcast I do. I have a podcast called Shadows of Legend, and it's people call in and share their experiences with the strange and the paranormal. I've talked to people from all over the world. everything from Bigfoot to aliens, ghosts, demons, everything. So, because like I said, it's all about the story, and I love people's stories. So, yeah, it's a bit of an eclectic mix there, and you can look at it all put together. You think that's crazy. So,
All right. So now, Jamie, would you like to close us out? Tell people where to find us?
I would, but you know how that goes.
You
Hey,
do a great job.
I forget every time, but I will say this. If you do want to watch this podcast, listen to it, go to alwaysrightpodcast.com. We have multiple ways you can watch us. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, something else. I don't remember what it was. What was it?
Amazon Music?
Yeah, exactly. See, that's what I meant. If you have an idea you'd like us to cover, or if you want to come on our podcast, simply email us at alwaysrightpodcast@gmail.com, and Karisa will get back to you because I'll read the email, forget I read it, and have to unread it so she can see that it's in there, and then she shall contact you. Because that's our relationship.
Yes, and that's just how it works.
Yes. So
thank you, Charles, for coming on.
Well,
and we hope you have much success with your books and your writing. So until then, and until next time, for our listeners, thank you for listening. And as always, I'm author Karisa DeLay.
And I'm author Jaime Vendera, and always right.